The whole room froze. A murmur of disbelief spread like wildfire. I felt my heart drop to my stomach as his hand shot out, quick and decisive. I had only glanced down at the phone for a second, just to check the message from him, my secret. But that second, that one moment of weakness, was enough. Before I could even register the pressure building in my chest, the phone was ripped from my hand. He didn't even look at me. He didn't need to. The message was already there, displayed in full view for everyone to see. He read it aloud. Everyone heard it. The words I thought would remain mine and his. Now, they were laid bare, exposed under the harsh light of scrutiny. "Why are you texting him?" he sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. I wanted to shrink, to disappear under the weight of his gaze, but it was no use. His eyes were daggers now. I didn't know what hurt more, the fact that my secret was out or the betrayal of hearing my private thoughts, my vulnerability, torn apart by someone who once promised never to make me feel small. Every second that passed was another blow to my already shattered sense of security. I felt like I was suffocating, gasping for air, trapped in the shame of my own choices. How could I have let it go this far? How could I have been so reckless? But it wasn't just the message. It wasn't just the words I had carelessly typed under the table while pretending to listen. It was the realization that everything I had thought I knew about my relationship, about us, was a lie. I had let myself believe for so long that there was something real, something deep, only to have it dismantled in one brutal moment of honesty. I had crossed a line. And now, there was no going back. I heard a soft chuckle from the back of the room, a harsh, mocking laugh that cut through the silence like a knife. It wasn't him. It was the others, the onlookers who had been watching, waiting for something like this to happen. Their eyes were trained on me now, a mix of judgment, curiosity, and something darker, more unsettling. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about how they saw me. The heat in my face was unbearable. I wished for the ground to swallow me whole. I wanted to disappear. But even in that dark, suffocating moment, I couldn't escape the truth. He stared at me now, his hand still gripping my phone like it was the last shred of control he had left over me. "So, what's this? Another secret? Another lie?" His voice was low, but there was a venom in it that made me flinch. His words were sharper than the most cutting knife. I opened my mouth, wanting to explain, wanting to say something, but no words came. What could I say? How could I defend myself when I was so exposed, so raw? The silence between us was deafening. I could hear my pulse in my ears, louder than anything else. The embarrassment swelled within me like a storm, threatening to burst open at any moment. And yet, despite the weight of everything crashing down on me, I couldn't help but feel a small, desperate part of me begging for him to understand. Could he? Could he ever see why I had done it? The secret, the messages? It wasn't about him, not entirely. It was about something else, something I was too scared to face. But now, as he stood there, holding my phone in his hands, reading out my deepest mistakes, I realized that he didn't matter. Not anymore. What mattered now was what came next, the aftermath. The truth was out, and I had no idea how to put the pieces back together. The room felt like it was closing in on me, as though the walls were slowly compressing, squeezing the air out of my lungs. My chest was tight, and I couldn't seem to catch my breath. Every movement, every glance from anyone in the room felt like a heavy weight pushing down on my fragile state of mind. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears, drowning out everything else, but still, I couldn't escape the sounds that filled the room, the sharpness of his voice, the hum of murmurs from the other students, the faint rustle of clothes as people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. It was like a scene I had watched 100 times in movies, the moment when everything unravels. But in those movies, the characters always had a sense of control. They would say something witty, or even just stand their ground, and the world would somehow shift back into focus. But not me. I was trapped in my own nightmare, drowning in the suffocating grip of my own mistakes. There was no witty comeback. No defense. There was only the truth, laid bare and raw, like an open wound exposed to the light. And I didn't know how to fix it. He was still holding the phone in his hands, his fingers gripping it tightly as though it was some sort of trophy. A symbol of his power over me now. I could see the anger in his eyes, that look of disbelief and betrayal that burned through me like acid. It wasn't just the words in the message that hurt him, I realized. It was the fact that I had betrayed us, that I had gone behind his back and shared my thoughts with someone else. I had crossed a line, and I could see the devastation on his face as he processed that. But what about me? What about my feelings? I had been suffocating in this relationship for so long, carrying around the weight of expectations and unspoken rules. The messages on my phone had been my small, secret escape, my way to connect with someone who made me feel seen, who listened to me in a way that no one else did. I had never meant for it to go this far. I had never meant to hurt him. But it didn't matter. The damage was done. I opened my mouth to speak, to explain, but the words caught in my throat. How could I explain the loneliness I had been feeling? How could I make him understand that the messages weren't about him, not really, but about me trying to find a way to feel alive again? But no, there was no way to put that into words, not when the trust between us had been shattered in an instant. All I could do was stand there, powerless, watching as he read the message aloud to the room. You're so much more than he could ever be. I'm counting down the days until we're together again. I miss you more than you'll ever know. He spat the words out like they were poison, his voice seething with disgust. I couldn't look at him. I couldn't look at anyone. The shame and regret twisted inside me, gnawing at my insides like a ravenous beast. My fingers tingled, and I clutched at my arms, desperately trying to hold myself together. It was like the floor had dropped out from under me, and I was free-falling, spinning, unable to grab onto anything to stop the descent. Everything felt so surreal. This couldn't be real. It couldn't be happening. Not to me. Not like this. I heard someone clear their throat from the back of the room, a sign that the awkward tension was beginning to eat away at everyone else too. Some people shifted in their seats, trying to pretend like they weren't watching the spectacle unfold before them. But I could feel their eyes, all of them on me, burning through me like I was nothing more than an object for their judgment. I had never felt so small, so exposed. He slammed the phone down onto the table with a force that made everyone jump. I flinched instinctively, the sound ringing in my ears. His eyes never left me, though. They were cold, like ice, and I couldn't read them anymore. He had shut me out completely. I could feel it. It was in the way he held himself, in the way his shoulders were stiff and rigid, as though he was holding back the fury that had exploded within him. The phone, the message, everything, had become a catalyst for a storm that had been brewing between us for months, years, even. I can't believe you did this. His voice was low now, quieter, but there was no mistaking the hurt in his words. It cut deeper than any anger. The pain in his voice was a reminder of the trust one had broken, the love I had betrayed. I never wanted to hurt you, I whispered, but it felt weak, like a pathetic excuse, and I hated myself for even saying it. I felt small, insignificant. Words were useless now. They couldn't fix what I had done. He didn't respond at first. He just stared at me, his jaw clenched, as if he were battling with something inside him. And then, just like that, he turned and walked out of the room without another word. The silence that followed was deafening. It was like a physical weight pressing down on everyone, suffocating the air, stealing the life from the space. His departure left a void that I couldn't fill. I could still hear the echo of his footsteps fading away as if he were walking out of my life for good. I didn't know what to do, what to say, or how to fix this. The truth had come out, and there was no going back. I stood there, frozen, as the reality of it all settled in. It wasn't just a message that had been exposed, it was everything I had hidden from him. Everything I had tried to keep buried inside. All the fears, the doubts, the loneliness, the moments of weakness. All of it was now exposed, laid bare for the world to see. And in that moment, I realized something that I hadn't wanted to admit before. This wasn't just about the phone or the messages. This was about everything we hadn't said to each other over the years. The way we had drifted apart, silently, without acknowledging the space between us. The way I had been too afraid to speak up, to express how I was feeling, because I didn't want to rock the boat. The way I had kept my distance emotionally, while pretending that everything was fine. The truth was, I had been suffocating long before I picked up my phone and sent that message. I had been suffocating in a relationship that had become stagnant, that had lost its spark. And now, in the aftermath of that moment, I was drowning. I turned to face the rest of the room, trying to shake off the feeling of being completely exposed. But all I saw were eyes. Eyes full of judgment, curiosity, and something darker. I had always feared what people thought of me, but now I could feel the weight of their gaze, like 100 invisible hands pushing me down into the depths of my own shame. The silence that followed his departure was suffocating. My ears rang with the absence of sound. It wasn't a peaceful quiet. It wasn't the kind of stillness you find in nature or in the moments just before you fall asleep. It was the kind of silence that crushes you, that makes you feel like the world is closing in on you, suffocating you with its weight. And it was all my fault. I stood there for what felt like hours, unable to move, unable to think, my body frozen in place. My chest was tight, and my throat burned with the desire to speak, but no words came. I wanted to run after him, to beg for his forgiveness, to explain everything that had been going on in my mind. But I knew it wouldn't matter. Not anymore. The damage had been done. I glanced around the room, but no one looked at me. The students who had once been so eager to laugh and joke now seemed like shadows, their faces expressions of quiet disbelief or indifference. Some were pretending not to watch, some were openly staring, their eyes filled with curiosity and judgment. I could feel them, all of them, on me. I had never been so aware of their presence before. The eyes on me were burning, like hot coals that made my skin crawl. Each pair of eyes was another reminder of what I had just lost. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to be anywhere but here. But I couldn't. I was stuck, rooted to the spot, as though my feet were cemented into the floor. My hands trembled slightly at my sides, my pulse pounding in my ears. I knew I had done something unforgivable. In his eyes, I had betrayed him, not just with the message but with every secret I had kept hidden from him. I had made him doubt me, doubt everything between us. I had made him feel like he was nothing. And that thought alone made me sick to my stomach. I could hear his voice in my head, a memory of the words he had spoken to me just moments before, "I can't believe you did this." That voice, so filled with hurt, echoed through my thoughts, each repetition a jagged shard of pain lodged deep within me. The guilt and regret surged within me in waves, crashing over me with such force that it was hard to breathe. How had I let it go this far? How had I allowed myself to fall so deep into this mess? I wanted to understand it. I wanted to make sense of everything, to understand why I had done it. Why I had crossed a line I knew I could never come back from. But the more I tried to think, the more confused I became. It wasn't about the messages, not really. It was about something deeper. Something that I had never allowed myself to face, never allowed myself to admit. The messages had been an escape from the suffocating weight of the life I had been living, from the loneliness that had crept in over time. But it wasn't just about him. It wasn't just about us. It was about me. I had been so afraid for so long to confront the truth. The truth that I had been losing myself for a while. That the relationship I thought I had was no longer the one I needed, that the person I had once been had been swallowed up by the expectations of others, the fear of disappointing them, the fear of being vulnerable. I had tried to keep up appearances, to pretend that everything was okay, that everything was fine. But in the process, I had buried my own needs, my own feelings. I had kept secrets, small ones at first, then bigger ones, until one day, those secrets had erupted, exploding into the open, and there was no turning back. But what hurt even more than that was knowing that I had hurt him. I had hurt someone who, at one point, had meant everything to me. And now, I didn't know if I could ever undo the damage I had caused. I finally moved, though it was more of a mechanical response than a conscious decision. I walked to the door of the classroom, my legs heavy, like they were filled with lead. I paused for a moment before opening it, my hand on the handle, my mind racing with thoughts I couldn't quite form into words. When I stepped out into the hallway, I felt a wave of cold air rush over me, a stark contrast to the stifling heat of the classroom. It didn't help. I still felt like I was suffocating. The reality of the situation had settled in, and it was crushing. I had lost him. I had lost everything I had once cared about. The promise of something real, something deep, was gone. The connection we had shared, if it had even been real, was now broken beyond repair. I walked aimlessly down the hallway, my mind in a fog. I wasn't sure where I was going or even what I was hoping to accomplish. I just needed to escape, to be alone, to think, to breathe. My phone vibrated in my pocket, and I almost didn't check it. But something, some sick sense of curiosity, made me pull it out anyway. It was a message from him. I stared at it for a moment, unsure if I should open it. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to pretend like everything was fine, but I knew I couldn't. I had to face it. I had to see what he had to say, even if it broke me further. "We need to talk. Don't avoid me. I'm not letting this go." The words sent a chill down my spine. Of course, he wasn't letting it go. How could he? How could I expect him to? What I had done wasn't something you just brush under the rug. It was betrayal, raw, painful, and inescapable. I slid down the wall next to me, the weight of everything finally crashing down on me. The tears that I had been holding back, the ones I thought I had run out of, finally started to spill over. I wiped my face with the back of my hand, but it didn't help. The floodgates had opened, and now there was no stopping it. I was broken. The tears weren't just for him, for what I had lost. They were for me, for the person I had become. The world seemed to move in slow motion around me as I sat there on the cold floor, my back pressed against the wall, the tears falling freely down my face. I couldn't change what had happened. I couldn't undo the mistakes I had made. But somewhere deep inside me, I knew this was only the beginning. The consequences of what I had done were just beginning to unfold, and I had no idea how to stop them. I don't remember how long I sat there, slumped against the cold walls of the hallway. It felt like time had lost its meaning. The world around me blurred into a soft, indistinct haze. My tears had dried up, leaving behind the bitter taste of salt on my lips. There was nothing but emptiness, nothing but a painful awareness of my own failings. My phone was still in my hand, its screen cracked in one corner from the countless drops and frustrations that had marked the moments before everything fell apart. I stared at the message again, the one from him. His words loomed over me, every letter sinking deeper into my soul, cutting through whatever little remained of my resolve. We need to talk. Don't avoid me. I'm not letting this go. How could I possibly face him? How could I look into his eyes and explain what had driven me to make the decisions I had? How could I even begin to describe the isolation that had wrapped itself around me for so long, the emotional distance that had quietly crept into our relationship without either of us acknowledging it? I didn't know if words would be enough anymore, and part of me was terrified that no matter what I said, it would never be enough to undo the hurt I had caused. I slowly stood up, my legs shaking beneath me. I had no idea where I was going, or even if I had the strength to go anywhere. But I knew I couldn't stay here. Not anymore. I couldn't hide from this. Not anymore. The walk back to the classroom was a blur, but with each step, the knot in my stomach tightened. Every sound seemed muffled, every breath felt shallow, as if the weight of what I had done was pressing down on me, suffocating me, as if I had no right to even exist in this space anymore. When I pushed open the door, the classroom fell silent. It was like they had all been waiting for me. They had all been witnesses to something I couldn't take back, and the looks on their faces told me that they, too, had seen the truth about me. I wasn't just a girl with a secret anymore. I was a broken mess, exposed, shattered. But there he was, sitting at his desk, his face hard, his jaw clenched, his eyes still filled with the fury and pain I had seen before. He wasn't the same person I had known just a few hours ago. The trust one had taken for granted, the foundation of what we were, was gone. And I had no idea how to get it back. His gaze met mine, and in it, there was something that almost stopped me in my tracks, the unmistakable knowledge that I had lost him. Not just lost him for the moment, but maybe forever. Sit down, he said, his voice low, controlled, but laced with an undercurrent of hurt that made my heart ache. There was no command in his tone, no anger anymore, just resignation. It was worse than if he had yelled at me, worse than if he had thrown the phone at me again. This was the silence of something dying. Of something broken beyond repair. I sat down across from him, my hands trembling, my body rigid, as though I was about to face some unbearable judgment. The air between us was thick with everything we hadn't said. The words I had wanted to say since the moment the message was read aloud to the class, words that had gotten lost somewhere in the chaos, somewhere in the noise of my own fears, now hung in the room, unanswered. "I'm sorry," I whispered, but it felt so hollow, so empty, as if it was the only thing I could say that didn't require more effort. Sorry for what? For the betrayal? For the lies? For the fact that I had gotten too comfortable in the darkness of my own dissatisfaction and had dragged him into it with me? Sorry was a word that could never encompass what I had done. Sorry couldn't undo the pain in his eyes. Sorry didn't give him back what he had lost. "I can't even look at you right now," he said, his voice strained, and my heart broke a little more with every word. It wasn't anger that held him in place, it was the crushing weight of disappointment, the kind that stung worse than any slap, worse than any shout. I had betrayed his trust, and nothing I could say now would change what had happened. But I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop myself from trying to fix it, even though deep down, I knew there was no way to. "Please," I said, my voice cracking. "Please let me explain." "You don't need to explain," he interrupted, and there was finality in his tone that made my chest tighten. "I get it. You don't have to say anything else. I already know what you were doing. What you were thinking. And it hurts more than you could ever know." A bitter lump formed in my throat, and I fought to hold back the sobs that threatened to rise. I wanted to reach out to him, to make him understand, to show him how sorry I was, but I couldn't. There was nothing I could say that would make him feel what I felt now. The guilt, the regret, the heartbreak. And suddenly, I realized that this was the price of my actions. Not the embarrassment. Not the public shaming. Not the shame in front of my classmates. No, the hollow look in his eyes, the emptiness between us, the silence that followed, this was the price I would have to pay. I never meant for it to go this far, I said through clenched teeth, my voice thick with emotion. I swear to you. I never wanted to hurt you. I just didn't know how to deal with everything. The way things were going. The way I was feeling. I didn't know either, he said quietly. But I thought we were in this together. I thought you trusted me. And you went behind my back. You went to someone else when you should have come to me. The words stung, not just because they were true, but because I knew how right he was. He was the one person who should have known, the one person I should have turned to. But I didn't. And in that moment, I hated myself for it. For being too afraid, too proud, or too lost to ask for help. I'm sorry, I said again, but I didn't expect him to forgive me. I didn't think any of my words could do that. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but please know that it wasn't about you. It was about me. I just didn't know how to say it. I didn't know how to tell you that I was drowning. He didn't respond immediately. His gaze softened, just for a moment, and I could see the battle raging inside of him. But then, his face hardened again, the walls rising between us, and I knew, in that moment, that he had made his decision. He wasn't going to fight for us anymore. I think we need space, he said, the words falling between us like a door slamming shut. I need to think about everything. About us. About what this is, what it was. The air in the room felt impossibly heavy, suffocating me. I couldn't find the strength to speak, to argue, to ask for more time. The truth was, I had already lost him, and no amount of pleading would change that. He needed space. And I needed to face the reality of what I had done. I understand, I whispered, my voice barely audible, the weight of my words pressing down on me. I stood up, but he didn't look at me. I wasn't sure if he even knew I was leaving. And as I walked out of the room, I realized that this was it. The end of something I thought I could never lose, the end of a love I had taken for granted. I had lost it all, not just the trust, not just the relationship, but the part of me that had been willing to fight for us, the part of me that had believed it was possible to go back. But the truth was, I couldn't go back. I couldn't undo the mistakes I had made. And the hardest thing of all was realizing that sometimes, you can't repair what's been broken.